welcome to another video. Today's going to be a bit of a different one. Today we're going to talk about my car history, where I've come from, and growing up in the New Zealand car scene. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself properly. You guys know me as Corner Hunter, but my actual name's Shane. So if you see me at one of the meets or an event, come up and say, "What's up, Shane?" I'm always down to meet new people. There's so many good cars and people in the New Zealand car scene, man. It's all about community. My first introduction to turbo cars were Mazda Familia GTXs. Two of my friends had them, and man, I could never go back after that. The feeling of boost, it was so good. I still love those cars to this day. Such good cars. And my first turbo car was a 1991 Nissan Skyline GTST Coupe. Man, when I got that car, I really didn't know anything about cars. Didn't know how to service them or anything. And by the end of it, we were modifying everything, man. Exhaust, pod filters, intercoolers, boost controllers, you name it. Full sound system. Anything that could be modified, we were having a go at, man. And in that one, I learned how to drag race, do burnouts, and start to learn how to drift. Back in 2001, 2002, cruising town in Auckland city streets was what you did on a Friday and Saturday night, man. And after that, you went rolling to the drags. Man, I mean the illegal drags. This was way back in the day, man, where you'd roll with all your friends and watch people drag race their Evos and Skylines and things. It was crazy times back then, man. But that's what we did back then. And then foreign rotary nationals started being a positive influence and making people take their car to the drag strip if they wanted to race, taking it off the road, doing it in a safe environment. And it started to evolve. People started getting faster and faster. We saw our first 10-second car. We started seeing GDRs in the 10s, Evos in the 10s, and cars got more and more serious. People were modifying their street cars to go drag racing. Man, we did the best with what we had back then. We weren't making massive power, but it was all about technique and it was all about vibe, and the community was building and the scene was getting massive back then. And the absolute turning point for me was the first round of D1NZ. Seeing drifting on a track blew my mind. It was the first time I'd seen it in real life. Justin Roode, JT, Nick T-Boone out there absolutely shredding, and I knew I had to have a go at this. So over the next year, we watched every event, we went to every round, any drift day, any bit of drifting we could get into, learned all about it, and started putting together a car that could do it. First few rounds of watching D1NZ, I was hooked, man. I needed a Silvia and I needed to get out there. So I picked up a 1995 Nissan Silvia S14 Ks, pre-facelift on the front, facelift on the back. It had all sorts of Japanese parts like Blitz intercooler, Blitz exhaust, had coilovers, man, it had a good recipe. And as I got to know that car a bit better, it had all sorts of goodies. It had Power FC, it had S15 turbo, got it tuned, it made like 210 kilowatts, which was awesome. We started learning how to street drift and learn how to control the car. Then I started going to track days in it, man. It was such a cool way to get into motorsport. Following that car, I wanted to take it a bit more seriously, and I wanted to have a dedicated car. So I sold that car and I started building my first car from scratch, which was a Nissan Laurel C33. I bought this car as a diesel manual car, like probably the worst spec you can get, but the car was super tidy in condition, facelift, and that was our base for it, man. I remember going out to Redline Performance once, and on one day picking up an RB25 DET, a T3 T4 turbo, a gritty inlet plenum, teal wastegate, blow-off valve, I forget what else, coilovers, all sorts. We were fully loaded. Then it was back to the garage to figure out how to build this car. And back then I was hanging with my crew, the Drift Militia, and they had mostly C33 Laurels, a few Ceferos, a couple of Skylines, but we're all RB powered cars. Between the lot of us, man, they taught me so much about it, and together we got that car together, man. It was a big build. It was my first full-on build, man, where we went from diesel motor to a petrol motor. We went and converted everything, man. We did brakes, we did coilovers, we did cooling systems, full exhaust, you name it. When we were done, the car made like 280 kilowatts at the wheels, which was a big deal back then. This was a fast street car, man. So I got the car all legal, hit the street, and then it was time to start hitting my first drift days, which happened to be a D2NZ day at Pukekohe, and then followed by Reese Mill and Drift School, where I really got a taste for it and started to figure it out. And after that, man, after those 2 days, I was hooked. Everything in the car changed direction, man. I started throwing everything at trying to get grip, angle, you name it, just to get out there and drift even more. And at this point, the car was still mostly a street car that I did some track days in. But with rule changes and the fact I wanted to start competing meant I needed a roll cage. And at that point, you needed a half cage. So got a half cage and started competing in Driftopia events and had an absolute blast. And then when we got a bit more serious, you needed a full roll cage. So then we stripped the car out as much as we could. Full roll cage, harnesses, and put all the safety gear in, and we really started to compete, man. And then at that point, I got the opportunity to start driving in D1NZ. So at that point, things started to get serious. So we painted the car, gave it a livery, we got new sponsors on board. It made this car really serious, and it started to look super tough. In my first season of D1NZ, I was lucky enough to go up against Gaz Wider in the grand final in the top 16. Man, I was so nervous. I'd never flown into the sweeper faster in my life chasing him. Ended up going off and had a big moment. The car was like up on two wheels, man. That was super scary. That guy's a super talented driver. I've got nothing but respect, man. But from that, I learned so much. And next season, it was into the car, making it more serious and more competitive. Getting more serious meant more power. And unfortunately, more power means breaking things a lot. Gearboxes, motors. In that D1 car, I went through 3 RB25 DT motors in different variations. Max power we're putting out was about 330 kilowatts at the wheels, but you started to break things as serious as you got. And you were pushing the car seriously hard, man. But it was such a good learning curve. I learned so many good driving skills, got to drive with some of the best, got to drive on a team with Mad Mike, Fangadan, and Jason Sellers. It was epic, man. In my final season in 2010, we really upped the level, man. We had a new naming rights sponsor. Both cars had new liveries. I was in a team with Jason Sellers. Man, we had matching track gear. We really lifted the standard and the professionalism of the sport, man. And in that season, everyone lifted the level. It was such a good season, man. It all came down to the final in Whangarei, and we got to drive in a team event. It was Mad Mike, Fangadan, Jason Sellers, and myself. We ended up winning the team event. 4-car drift trains, man, it was epic. What a send-off to the car and my D1NZ career. With my D1NZ career now at an end, it was time to move on to street cars, and I wanted an R32 sedan. And a friend of mine just so happened to be selling an RB20 DT powered one, so I picked that up. The car needed some love. The RB20 DT wasn't my flavor, so we knew what we were going to do. We sold the C33 D1 car as a rolling body, and we kept all the running gear out of that. It was a freshly built motor and gearbox and whatnot, and put it into the street car. Man, that car was so much fun. I loved toge driving in that, and I learned so much about driving in that car. That car eventually got vinyl wrapped in brown vinyl and rocked big Blitz 03 wheels. Man, that car was baller. It was like the epitome of style back then. I absolutely loved it. But like anything, I like trying different things, man. And a friend of mine had just built this A85 Corolla. He put a blacktop 4Age in it and done a bunch of work, and I drove it a couple of times and absolutely loved it. When he decided he wanted to sell that, I had to have it, man. So we picked that up off him, and after that, I learned all about NA driving, man. We gripped this car up to the max, and we would hit the toge and just drive, man. It was just such a driver's car, just pure and aggressive driving. Did some track days in it with friends. Man, I absolutely love that car. It was sick. After that, though, the turbo bug bit again. And it just so happened that the same mate decided he wanted to sell his next car, which was a JZX 100 Mark II. Manual turbo. I had to have it too. It was a bit of an ugly duckling when I got it, man. It had no aero, but it had coilovers on R34 GDR wheels, a front mount, had basic stuff. And over the next few months, I fitted aero parts to it. I changed all sorts of wheels. I had big 19 by 10.5 SSR Agel Strausses on it for a bit. Then I ended up settling on work Kiwami wheels. Man, that car was so cool. I love rolling in that car. And that was my first taste of JZXs. I love that JZX 100 Mark II, but it wasn't that great for toge driving, and I really missed it. So I wanted a more sports-orientated car that I could do a bit of drifting in again, because I was missing that again. So I picked up an S15. It was a Spec S, and it had a full Spec R conversion on it. This car had only done like 40,000 Ks. It was super clean. Put a Nismo two-way LSD, did a couple of drift days in it, and man, I just love that car. It was so good on the toge, and it was such a good driving position, man. I really, really like S15s. They're a true Japanese sports car. And this seems to be a bit of a recurring theme with me, man. I used to change my mind a lot when it came to cars, buy and sell them because I wanted to try everything and see what I like the best. And man, I wanted an A86 again. So I managed to find a swap for the S15 for this A86. It was a bit rough around the edges when I got it paint-wise and motor-wise, but it had all the good gear, man. Had a Hilux rear end, it had a W box, had a Link computer. So we drove it like that for a bit, beat the heck out of it, man. That silver top would just not die. It used so much oil, but it never died. So I picked up a low-K black top, and then it was on to like tidying it up and doing all sorts under the engine bay to make this car really handle. And that car went amazingly after that. But then unfortunately it started to use oil too. So the motor was out again, we fully rebuilt it. This time we decided to detail and tidy the engine bay as much as possible to make this car look sick. The time had also finally come to give this car a makeover, man. So it was off for a couple of months, and we did outside, in the door jambs, in the boot, the whole engine bay, under the bonnet. We detailed everything. This car looked so fresh and clean afterwards. It looked brand new, man. And this was honestly the epitome of my A86 builds. This car was just amazing. After that A86, I got sick of old car life. Man, no aircon, no heater. I wanted a bit of comfort. I still wanted the Togo, but I wanted a bit of comfort. So I decided to pick up a GT86. And I love that car, man. That was the best of both worlds. But unfortunately, it didn't last that long. Lots of problems with that car. And at the end of the day, I just run out of things to modify. I had the turbo bug again. I didn't want to spend the money on that. It was going to be like 15 grand to turbo it to make like 200 kilowatts. So I started looking for JZs again. And this is where the JZX 100 Mark II comes in. I was actually looking for a JZX 100 Chaser at the time. Couldn't find any. Looked at a real cool JZX 90 Mark II, which I love. That's my favorite shape. It was a bit rough around the edges. I was humming and hawing, and then I went and test drove the JZX 110 and loved it, man. The power was savage. It made 385 kilowatts at the wheels, had a digital dash, Garrett turbo, Link ECU, all the good bits. I was hooked, man. Only problem was the car looked ugly, man. Had no aero, was sitting up high. It was like, man, we need to do something about this ASAP. It's really hard to get aero bits for this car, but I was lucky enough, about a month later, a kit popped up down the line. So next thing I was in my car going to get it. And man, what a difference that made. The aero kit transformed the car. We slammed it out and we started doing bits and pieces to it to make it look real cool. And after that, we started doing track days like foreign rotors and chrome, and this car was in its element, man. On one day, we drove 2 hours to the track, we did roll racing, we did drifting, we did cruise with your mates, we did skid pan, and guess what? We even did circuit racing and drove another 2 hours home. The car ran flawlessly. Didn't even have to pop the bonnet, man. It was just in its element. And from then on, I was hooked. This car is just so good for those days. It's just super reliable. And man, I absolutely love this car. But with anything, that need for an R32 came back. And with prices going through the roof, I made the decision I had to have one before it was too late. And I was looking around. The plan was to get a real tidy bodied R32 with potentially mechanical issues or whatever that needed fixing. What I ended up getting was a mechanically sound car with not a great body. No rust, but like the paint was destroyed and what have you. But I knew when I went to see it, I had to have it. So we picked that car up and then started modifying it. First of all, we tidied up all the bits and pieces from the last owner and we just started driving the car over full summer. Just enjoying it, having fun. It looked rough as. The paint was real average, but it sat super low with cool aero GDR front on it. And then the time finally came. We gave the car a full birthday, a full door open respray, and man, the car tidied up and it looks immaculate. It looks OEM, just like I was hoping it would. And it's been such a good car. And it's a car you guys see at meets all the time now. And now we had the JZX 110 Mark II. I wanted to start filming track days. So I bought a GoPro and started filming and figuring out how to make videos. And from there, I started filming other mods on the cars and events and things and making YouTube videos and just figuring it out, man. And from there, it's turned into what it is today, where I go to nearly every event, met so many people, traveling around the country, modifying cars. Man, I love it. The scene has been really good to me over the years. I've been into it for over 20 years now. And this is my way of giving back, man. New Zealand car scene is strong. We build some of the best cars in the world. And I love it, man. I love meeting everyone out there. And this is what it's all about, man. Well, guys, that was a bit of a different video. I wanted to add some context, let you know a bit more about me, where I've been growing up in the New Zealand car scene. Man, we've got such a good scene, and I'm doing everything I can to blow it up and let the world know all about it, man. If you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and come say what's up at the next meet.